All right, we're going to go ahead and get started tonight. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to tonight's program. My name is Pat Kane, Public Programs and Visitor Services Coordinator at the Museum of the Grand Prairie, part of the Champaign County Forest Preserve District. And we are here tonight for an excellent virtual program titled A Whole Nother Ball Game, Baseball in Central Illinois from the 1860s to the 1970s. And in just a few short moments, going to welcome on Barbara Oehschlaeger-Garvey, our Museum and Education Department Director at the Champaign County Forest Preserve District, to present tonight's awesome program. But before we get there, I just want to go over a few logistical things, some housekeeping items. I'll let you know about what else is coming up at the Museum of the Grand Prairie and the Champaign County Forest Preserve District. First, if you could, let us know where you're watching from tonight by writing down in the comment section below where you're tuning in from tonight for tonight's virtual program. Have a few folks doing that already. Susie's tuning in from Mahomet, right where the museum is located in Mahomet, Illinois. And Kathleen is tuning in from Canton. So thank you, Susie and Kathleen, for letting us know where you're watching from. But we always love to know where folks are viewing our programs from. So feel free, if you're comfortable, to write where you're watching from down in the comments section. Also, a little bit about us. Museum of the Grand Prairie, our current mission is to collect, preserve, and interpret the cultural and natural history of Champaign County and East Central Illinois. We've been opened originally in 1968 as the Early American Museum, and we are part of the Champaign County Forest Preserve District, a collection of 7 forest preserves in Champaign County, as well as 2 educational facilities, including our museum at Lake of the Woods Forest Preserve in Mahomet, Museum of the Grand Prairie, and the Homer Lake Interpretive Center at Homer Lake Forest Preserve near Homer, Illinois. Also, we do want to hear from you. Want to get your thoughts on tonight's program. So after tonight's program, if you wouldn't mind, please complete this simple survey that I'm dropping into the comments right now. The short, simple survey should take you no more than 5-ish minutes to complete, but it'll help us improve our future programs and program offerings. Let us know what you thought of tonight's program, what other programs you may be interested in the museum and the Forest Preserve District providing. Again, it should only take a few minutes, and we would thank you so much for actually filling out that survey. A few other programs coming up in the near future. On Thursday, September 2nd, so a week from tonight, our friends over at the Homer Lake Interpretive Center are going to put on another online event via Zoom titled Mosquitoes in East Central Illinois. Holly Tootin, who is a vector ecologist with the Illinois Natural History Survey Medical Entomology Lab, is going to present this program, and registration is required for that program. So visit ccfpd.org, the Champaign County Forest Preserve District website, to learn how to register for that program. Again, Thursday, September 2nd, from 7 to 8 p.m., this program titled Mosquitoes in East Central Illinois, going to be a virtual program that you do need to register for, as it will take place on Zoom. So be sure to register so you can get that Zoom information. On Saturday, September 11th, we're going to put on our annual Prairie Stories event, where we provide a number of different demonstrations and activities to help bring 19th century East Central Illinois history to life. We'll have local blacksmiths, schoolhouse lessons, butter churning, candle dipping, and so much more at this event. All current public health guidelines will be followed. All demonstrations and activities will take place outdoors in the interest of keeping our patrons and our staff and our volunteers as safe as possible. So again, this Prairie Stories event is happening on Saturday, September 11th at our museum at Lake of the Woods Forest Preserve, located in Mahomet, Illinois, here in East Central Illinois. And the program will take place on Saturday, September 11th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. The Museum of the Grand Prairie and Homer Lake Interpretive Center are open to the public. We're open from 1 to 5 p.m. Tuesdays through Saturdays at the Museum of the Grand Prairie, and so is the Homer Lake Interpretive Center, open from 1 to 5 p.m. Tuesdays through Saturdays. So if you're local, get out and visit these awesome free educational facilities to learn about local history as well as our natural world around us over at the Homer Lake Interpretive Center. For more info about these programs and everything else happening at the Museum of the Grand Prairie and Champaign County Forest Preserve District, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, or visit museumofthegrandprairie.org or ccfpd.org. Again, let us know where you're watching from tonight. We love to hear from you. And if you have any questions, also feel free to jot those in the comments section. My mom's tuning in from Rantoul. Hey, Mom. And David's tuning in all the way from Fairfax, Virginia, as well as another David is tuning in from Athens, Illinois. So welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us for tonight's program. And I also want to thank our presenter for tonight, Barb. I'm going to bring Barb on. And Barb, you there? Can you hear me?
I am here.
Okay.
My camera for some reason isn't working, but my voice is.
That's totally fine. Yeah. So Barb is going to present tonight's program, and I'm pleased to introduce her for that. And we thank her so much for presenting this program for us tonight. So Barb Oehschlaeger-Garvey is the director of the Museum and Education Department at the Champaign County Forest Preserve District. And this includes overseeing operations of the district's educational facilities, which include, as I mentioned before, the Museum of the Grand Prairie at Lake of the Woods Forest Preserve in Mahomet, which focuses on local cultural and natural history, of course, and the Homer Lake Interpretive Center at Homer Lake Forest Preserve in Homer, which focuses on the natural world in Champaign County and environmental education. She also oversees the staff at both of those facilities and programming and education and interpretation that goes on throughout Champaign County Forest Preserve District. Prior to becoming director of the department, Barb served as curator at the museum for 12 years. She received her bachelor's in anthropology and art history from Indiana University in Bloomington and has a PhD in art history from the University of Illinois. Barb is originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, and is a big fan of baseball, especially the Cincinnati Reds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is very appropriate for tonight's program. And her other passions include local Abe Lincoln related history and spending time with her beautiful family. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Barb. Let's give Barb a warm virtual welcome, all of us tuning in out there. So thank you so much, Barb. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Pat. So yes, I am a huge Cincinnati Reds fan, but you will, if you tuned in to hear about the major leagues tonight, you will be disappointed because this is about local baseball. And local baseball has so many facets and so many people involved that I'm sure that I will have missed thousands and thousands of points. So what I would like to do is start out with a quote. I'm speaking to you from my house on Elm Street in Champaign, and right around the corner from me on Hill Street in Champaign, George Will, who is a national columnist, a fairly conservative columnist, but also somebody who's written a couple of books about his passion for baseball. He grew up on Hill Street around the corner from me. And in one of his books, he talks about growing up in Central Illinois and baseball in the same sentence. He says, in Central Illinois in the 1950s, when the world and I were young, the air was saturated with baseball. That is, the broadcasts of the Cubs and the White Sox and the Cardinals and the Browns. And the unreasonably black and almost perfectly flat topsoil of Central Illinois then as now was wonderfully configured for smooth infields and lush green outfields, one after another towards the horizon. So in George Will's world, Central Illinois is the perfect place for baseball. And it certainly has a baseball history almost as old as baseball itself. It was wildly popular in Champaign County and surrounding counties, even as early as the 1850s. And of course is still popular today. Lots and lots of little league teams. We called it Knot Hole in Cincinnati. And I think there are too many reasons to mention why it's was popular, but one of them, of course, has been referred to as our national game, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. It holds some communities together. The most common type of team in the late 19th and early 20th century was what's called a town team, and towns like Buckley, Illinois, have had baseball teams since the 1880s that have been continuously running. There are several. Then there was several attempts at minor league teams throughout the area. Danville, Decatur, and Bloomington all had minor league teams, and I'll talk about that. I'll also talk a little bit about the University of Illinois and its baseball history, although very briefly. There, and something I've always loved about baseball is that baseball doesn't really require a particular body type to play, and so eventually it becomes available for everybody to play. All ethnicities, all races, even lots of women have played baseball, and particularly true in East Central Illinois. And I started out with this photograph of this African-American team from Champaign. That's about all we know about it, but the photograph appears to be from the 1920s. We know some by the late 30s that there are organized African-American teams in Champaign County. But this proves that that happens even earlier, and this is not a pickup team. This is a team that has wool uniforms, that has matching belts and caps and socks and even pretty nice cleats. So everybody was pouring their resources into playing baseball in Central Illinois. Now let's step back a little bit. This is Abner Doubleday, who is credited with inventing baseball, but he's not the inventor of baseball. Doubleday fired the first shot at Fort Sumter in the Civil War, and he played a pivotal role at Gettysburg. And of course, if you were creating a baseball myth, you would want Abner Doubleday to be the guy who invented baseball, but in fact, he didn't. I always think it's kind of like saying General MacArthur invented the Frisbee. It's something you would want to happen, but it didn't. The first notice we have of the word baseball is in the 1770s. This little book of morals called The Pretty Little Pocket Book, this illustration on the left. And we see three fellows with tri-corner hats, little colonial lads running from base to base, which seem to be kind of pillars, right? This is probably not the baseball that we know, but it may be a precursor. There are several of them, this and a game called Rounders, and possibly also cricket. But by 1857, which is what this article from the Bloomington Pantagraph is from, by that time we have baseball being talked about in a relatively local newspaper. And if you look at the center of this article, it says, "Cricket is a very fine game, and we do not wonder that a large number of our citizens should be as fond of it here as they were in the land of their birth. But to our mind, it is hardly equal in the way of excitement to our national game." So in 1857, in Bloomington, Illinois, not in New York City or Washington, D.C., or any place with a large population, right? In Bloomington, Illinois, we're talking about baseball as our national game. And that's because it brought people together. Men at the bottom, you can see it says, men of all nations have a liking for the games which they played in their boyhood. And no matter how liberal they may be in their opinions generally, they are very apt to believe that their national sports are a trifle in advance of all others. So this is a unifying game, baseball. So what was that early game like? Well, it was played on a big open field like this. Note that the fans are just basically standing on the sidelines. There's no protection for anybody. The fans were at the time were called cranks. The batsmen usually use just a plain stick. No one is wearing a glove. In those early days, no one wore a glove. You could catch the ball on one bounce, and it was still an out. The first team to score 21 runs or aces was called the winner, but in 1857 they changed that to the 9 innings. Thank God, because I can't imagine how long it would take to have 21 runs. Maybe a little bit less time if you could catch the ball on one bounce. And in 1858, the umpire, who you see here standing on the field just to the right of the center of the picture, the umpire got to call strikes for the first time, because before that, you could just stand there and wait for a pitch forever and ever. This is a notice from the Champaign newspaper from April of 1867, where we have the organization of the baseball club. The Prairie Club of Champaign was being formed by Mr. Van Horn and Mr. Scroggs and Mr. Maxwell and Mr. Guy. Scroggs is on the right, upper right here, and he was a newspaper man, a newspaper editor, but he was also a colonel in the Civil War in a regiment that was from Champaign. And the notion here, I think, is that, and this happened quite frequently, is that baseball was promoted by the Army during the Civil War to basically keep men from getting in trouble when they weren't in battle. So when they had idle time, one of the activities that was promoted was for them to play baseball. And when they came back, then they wanted to continue to play baseball. And so George Scroggs was one of the guys who formed a baseball club in Champaign, and the guy who formed a baseball club in Danville is the fellow on the bottom left, and his name is William Black, and he was a brevet general in the Civil War with a Danville regiment, and a congressman later in life. And he's actually related to the Representative Black from Danville now. But he also formed a baseball club back at home. And of course, baseball was all over the national imagination at that time. This is a cartoon about that was put out in November of 1860. The popular lithographers Currier and Ives depicted the results of the presidential election. But John Bell, the Northern Democrat, Stephen Douglas, the Southern Democrat, John Breckinridge, and Republican Abraham Lincoln are all depicted as baseball players. And who has the giantest bats? And that would be our old friend Abe Lincoln. And his bat says equal rights and free territories. So and of course the title is National Game, 3 outs and 1 run. So the 3 outs are the people who lost, and the 1 run is of course Abe, who also is holding the baseball. So I said there were town teams. Town teams were quite popular in the late 19th and early 20th century. And these are the Buckley Stars. Now, today, the Buckley team is called the Dutch Masters. But in 1886, this team was formed. They were all the rage. I want you to notice that they have a couple of people have gloves. Gloves start to come in probably the 1880s, 1890s. And you can tell who the pitcher is in this picture because he has the 19th century version of a warm-up jacket. It's called a sweater. Everybody else is just wearing their plain old wool uniform, but the pitcher is wearing a sweater. And he's also the fellow who holds the ball. The first person who gets a glove is the catcher, which makes some sense if you're burning a ball down to the catcher from the pitcher. And the second one is usually the pitcher, and then after that, the basemen start to get gloves. The name of the Buckley team today is the Dutch Masters, which is a reference to their German heritage. There was also a team. This is from about 1905. This team is a town team from Muhammad. And you can see that, again, we have a pitcher in his sweater and a catcher with a glove and a couple of other fellows with gloves, but the rest don't have them. And oftentimes in these pictures, there's also a mascot. And mascots are, at that point, children. And then written onto the photograph are the words ump and manager. That was not on their uniforms, but actually written on to the photograph later. Now, these town teams produced a lot of major leaguers. Of course, remember the major league was a lot different in those days, but one of them, the one I'm probably the most fond of, is a fellow whose name is Big Jeff Pfeffer on the left here. These are all trading cards. We are accustomed to having baseball cards be in a package with bubble gum. I don't know if they still come that way, but they did even when my children were kids. But these were in packages of cigarettes or packages of tobacco. So not exactly the healthiest thing, but that was what sold frequently, and these cards were in there. Big Jeff Pfeffer's first name was not Jeff at all. I think they just called him that because it rhymed. He was a pitcher and an outfielder. He played on an early University of Illinois team. He went on to play for the Chicago Cubs in 1910 and 1905 and 1910. And then he played for the Boston Bean Eaters from 1906 to 1909, and he had a ERA of about 3.4. Clark Griffith in the center there. He grew up in Bloomington. He was a pitcher from 1891 to 1914, and he was the player manager for the Reds when this card was made. But he went on to own the Washington Senators from 1920 to 1955, and he was a fierce opponent of night games. And then on the far right is Al Myers, who was a second baseman from Danville. And he played for the Kansas City Cowboys and the Philadelphia Quakers. I just love these names that we don't even know that how many major league teams there were. And the Washington Nationals. His not a seriously impressive guy, but I loved the picture where he seems to magically be keeping a baseball suspended in midair. A couple of other people. Earl Hamilton was from Gibson City. He played for the St. Louis Browns and the Pittsburgh Pirates and was a pitcher. He pitched 16 shutout innings on July 16th, 1920 with the Pirates before losing 7-0 against the New York Giants, clearly running out of steam in the 17th inning. Rube Benton, the person he was pitching against, also pitched for 16 shutout innings. So those guys didn't have too many relief pitchers, apparently. And then the last one that I wanted to talk about was here. This is from you can see this is from a cigar package. Was Charles, or they called him Old Haas Radborn. He was a starting pitcher for the Providence Grays and the Boston Beaneaters, and he had a 310 games won in 10 years as a pitcher. He is widely known as the person who was first photographed flipping his middle finger in a photograph. And he has been ranked as the 45th best pitcher of all time, believe it or not. He was a cranky old guy. Here he is with his team on the upper right of the photograph with the mustache. So baseball was really at the heart of every town. There were a series of minor leagues and some semi-professional leagues. One of the semi-professional teams that we had in Champaign was called the Velvets. And this is a picture from opening day in downtown Champaign in 1912. And there was an article in the News Gazette, or I guess it was the Champaign Gazette at the time, and I just love this. The Gazette's happy and loyal family of workers is going to join the rest of the population in celebration of the opening of the Illinois-Missouri League season at League Park next Monday. The last form will be sent from the composing to the press room as soon as after 1 o'clock as possible. So they're getting let off work to go to the baseball game. And that was actually not that unusual. Little side story. When I was a child, if you could produce a ticket to opening game, you could get an excused absence to go to see the Reds at the opening game. So baseball was supported by the local community in lots of ways. This sort of excitement led to the formation of the 3I League, which operated for the better part of 60 years, mostly in the I states, in Illinois, Indiana, and Iowa. This photograph is from Bloomington. Bloomington, Illinois had a team from 1902 to 1939. They were sometimes called the Bloomington Cardinals, sometimes called the Bloomington Bloomers. And one of their most famous players was a fellow named, here's the Bloomington Bloomers again later, was a fellow named Burley Grimes, who was well known for being the last person to throw a spitball. Spitballs were outlawed in 1920. But everybody who was throwing a spitball in 1920 was allowed to keep throwing spitballs. And so he actually threw his last spitball in 1934. I also wanted to show you this photograph of the Bloomington Bloomers to just show you how the styles of uniforms has changed, because in the early days we had the pillbox hats, but now there's a much closer fitting cap. And this is a year that the Bloomers experimented with silk uniforms. Uniforms were almost completely always made of wool, and then they started to do wool cotton blends in the 30s, but before that it was all wool. They started to do polyester blends in the 60s or synthetic blends in the 60s, and by the 80s uniforms had almost completely gone to polyester blends. But it wasn't until 2007 that the wool cap finally became a thing of the past in Major League Baseball, and it obviously gone earlier from these local teams. Decatur also had a minor league baseball team. Their minor league baseball team was called the Commies. It was short for Commodores. Commodore Stephen Decatur was a naval officer in the Revolutionary War, and that's where the name Decatur comes from. They had this team for 64 seasons, running from 1900 to 1974 with some years left out. They were in 3 different minor leagues, and they were affiliated mostly with the St. Louis Cardinals, but sometimes with the Giants and other teams. At first, they were owned by and played at Staley Field, and you can see the Staley buildings in the background, which eventually became Archer Daniels Midland. And of course, Staley also owned the Chicago Bears before they were the Chicago Bears, they were the Staley Bears. The Commies played also at Fans Field. This is a picture from Fans Field by 1930. And they had the first night game in Illinois, they claim, on May 14th of 1930. The first night game, incidentally, in the major leagues was in 1935 at Crossley Field in Cincinnati, believe it or not. And my mom and my great aunt were there. Danville also had a series of teams: the Speakers, the Veterans, the Dans, the Dodgers, the Warriors, and the Suns. And today they actually have a Central Illinois Collegiate Wooden Bat League team playing in Danville every summer. It's still called the Dans. This picture is from 1923, the first pitch of opening day in 1923 for the Danville Veterans. The Speakers was one of the first teams, and that team was named after Joe Cannon, who was the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the National House of Representatives. Joe Cannon was quite the character. He was a tough guy, and he didn't mince words about anybody, but he fought hard for Danville and was able to secure the National Cemetery for and the VA hospital for for Danville, and so they were grateful to him and named the team the Speakers for a while, and then the Veterans in honor of those two things. The fellow in the middle of this picture is Kennesaw Mountain Landis, the recently appointed first commissioner of baseball. And he was commissioner of baseball for a very long time and is widely credited as the fellow who kind of developed the restrictions on free agency that didn't get gotten rid of until very recently. So they were proud to have him there that day, on opening day in 1923. Another fascinating thing about Danville's minor league history is that in 1946, they managed to woo the Brooklyn Dodgers to have a minor league team there. And they built a beautiful wooden stadium the year after World War II was over. And that farm team actually tried to recruit Roy Campanella and Don Newcomb, both black players, but the Brooklyn Dodgers were not quite ready to go that far. But then in 1947, they did recruit Jackie Robinson. He was called up, and in June 20th of 1947, in this brand new beautiful stadium in Danville, there was an exhibition game at which Jackie Robinson played. This is a program from the first season. The official scorecard costs 10 cents. Now, if you go to the Danville Dans game, they'll give you a scorecard. But who keeps score? What I do. This is a promotional picture from the early days of the Danville Dans, the Danville Dodgers games. These are some player families, and if you look closely, you can see the wooden benches, and many of those benches are still in that stadium, and you can it's one of the few wooden stadiums still left in the country. I would highly encourage you to visit there sometime. There it is being constructed, and it looks a lot like that today. There's a lot of stuff built up around it. But it's a beautiful thing to go to. And here is the Danville Dodgers from 1948. Probably the most well-known of all of these people is Paul Shirvenko, this fellow in the center. He played 2 seasons with the Dodgers. And his manager at the time was Burley Grimes, the guy I told you about, who threw the spitball. He retired in Danville and was still playing in the minor league in 1948. The evolution of town teams into minor league teams also evolved into what we know as the Eastern Illinois Baseball, or EI, the EI League. The EI League was founded in 1935 by Shelby Himes, Jack Waldron, and Doc Leviti. And there were lots of local teams. That first year, the teams were fielded by the tiniest of towns: Leverett, Royal, Flatville, Buckley, Sadorus, Thomasboro, Seymour, a Chanute team, an Urbana team, and Rankin. St. Joe, Champaign, and Monticello asked to join, but they decided they only wanted to have 10 teams. And in 2015, there were 8 teams in the Eastern Illinois League. It is still going strong. So this is a team from the early days from Royal, and then on the bottom there are early days team from Flatville. I loved this quote from a book about EI baseball. Basically, EI baseball is a small town summer Sunday afternoon baseball. Fans are primarily small town and country people who have spent most of the summer Sunday afternoons of their lives going to such games, rooting for the home team and razzing the visitors, jeering the umpires, taking time out every now and then to get another beer, either from the car or from the concession stand, maybe grabbing some barbecued beef or a fish sandwich at the same time, hobnobbing with longtime friends, reminiscing. I think that sums up my experience of going to EI League games as well. And here is another photograph of the Buckley team. This one is from the 1937 Dutch Masters, and I love this this sign as you enter Buckley. Welcome to Buckley, a good place to live, home of the Dutch Masters, because that's what makes it a good place to live, right? And one of the probably more locally well-known players on the Royal team is here on the left, and that's Lauren Tate, who wrote for the News Gazette for many, many years about baseball and many other things. The Flatville team, in the 50s, the Flatville team and some of the other teams brought in celebrities to bring attention to the games. This one is Dizzy Dean, who played for the Cardinals, the Cubs, and the St. Louis Browns, but was really quite well known as a pitcher. He came to the Flatville to give a boost to the Flatville Flats. That's the name of the team, and they clearly presented him with the jersey to fit his size. I just never realized how gigantic Dizzy Dean was. I think he would be scary. In 1961 or in 60, Satchel Paige came to visit the Royal Giants, so the Royal Illinois team, and he's posing here with Tom Fletcher, who actually pitched for a game for the Detroit Tigers. His son, Darren Fletcher, had a fairly successful major league career. The EI League also had a Champaign team at some point, and obviously an Urbana team. And one of the people who played in the EI League on the Champaign team was Vern Lewis, who also played. Vern Lewis loved baseball, and he actually quit high school to try to join the Chicago American Giants, and had a contract, and his father would refuse to sign it. But Vern then went on to play for Leroy Barnes's Red Sox, and they played in the Corn Belt League. And Vern actually also was on, I think it's the Flatville team for 1 year. So there was a good bit of recruiting from team to team and from town to town. My favorite story about Vern Lewis is that even in his later years, he loved baseball so much he could be found watching it on more than one TV at a time. Who's done that? Not me. The Champaign Eagles was an Eastern Illinois League team in 1952, and they won league titles in 57 and 66. And Wardell Jackson was the person who kind of was the mastermind behind the Eagles for a while, and he was known to recruit several white players throughout the even though the team was predominantly African American. So I love the fact that that there was integration in the teams, not a lot, but some, and I to me it's because baseball was more important than anything else, and fielding a good team, right? I had another picture of three generations of Vern Lewis's family in baseball uniforms. I would be remiss if not mentioning Ernie Westfield, who played for the Birmingham Black Barons, which was a Negro League team. The Negro League started in the 1920s. It was an alternate for, because blacks were banned from baseball in that period, and even though in 1946 Jackie Robinson became the first African American to play baseball on a major league team, it didn't mean it was like an open door for everyone. And so the Negro Leagues lasted into the 1960s, and Ernie Westfield played for several years, starting in 1959 on the Birmingham Black Barons. And he lived the rest of his life in Champaign. He just passed away this past summer, and spent a lot of time raising money for young people to be able to play baseball. What about ladies? Well, ladies, we have newspaper articles from Champaign and Urbana newspapers about women playing pickup games, even in the 1860s and 1870s. And this Courier and Ives print is from that era as well. Women, the first women's baseball team that was paid to be, that they charged people to watch, was in 1875, and that was in Springfield, Illinois. So there were plenty of women playing baseball even before softball was promoted as a women's sport. Softball was actually invented in by I can't remember it was an Ivy League school, for young men who wanted to play baseball during the winter, and so they made a softer ball so they could play inside. There were African American women's teams as well. The Dolly Vardens are shown up here in the top left. They played in the late 1880s, and they were a novelty team, not a competition team, but clearly everybody liked baseball. In the 1920s and 1930s are sometimes called the rogue years for women's baseball, because occasionally women would be able to sign a contract with a minor league team. And now nobody really stopped it. I love this. This is a piece of sheet music that we actually have at the museum from the 1890s. And the theme of the song is, "Who would doubt that I'm a man? If she could catch a ball as well as anybody can," which, of course, it's dedicated to the new woman. So, a couple of people to note. These are not people from Central Illinois, but I thought they were worthy of note. Jackie Mitchell, in April 1931. She played for the Chattanooga Lookouts, and she struck out Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig in an exhibition game. And this woman, Edith Houghton, on the bottom right, was the first woman to serve as a Major League Baseball scout in 1946. And then that kind of leads us up to Dottie Schroeder. Dottie Schroeder played for the All-American Professional Girls Baseball League. And if you've seen the movie The League of Their Own, you know what I'm talking about. But there was a women's baseball league, started up during World War II, and ran for 9 seasons. And Dottie Schroeder from Sedoris, Illinois, so in Champaign County. She went for 1 year to Sedoris High School, but at age 15, she left to play for the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. She made it onto the cover of Parade magazine in the late 1940s, as the the model for young girls playing baseball. She was the only one. Oh, excuse me, I said 9, but she was the only player to play all 12 seasons of the Professional Girls Baseball League. She was an Ulster 3 times. She spent 4 more years touring with international teams. So all told, she played 16 seasons. She holds the records for the most games played in the Professional Girls Baseball League, and the most at bats at 4,129, the most RBIs, the most walks, the second most hits, and the third most home runs. Of course, part of that is because she played so long. And I read one place where they said she played second base, and they said she was defensively impenetrable. Some folks think that Dottie Schroeder is the model for Gina Davis's character in A League of Their Own. Dottie Schroeder, after her career, came back to Champaign, lived in Champaign, worked the rest of her life at collegiate cap and gown, and died relatively young and at 68 in the 1990s. And my favorite story about this is that I asked to use this parade picture from the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League organization, because they're still an organization. And the person who wrote back to me said, yes, of course you can use Dottie's picture. And we all knew Dottie and loved her. So not only was she a great baseball player, but she was kind of a nice person too. So what about the University of Illinois? Well, I mean, I could probably spend 3 or 4 hours just talking about any one of these topics, but I'm just going to touch on a few things at University of Illinois. This is George Huff. George Huff was the head baseball coach of the University of Illinois baseball teams from 1896 to 1919. He had 317 wins and 97 losses and 4 ties. They won 12 conference championships, and they never finished lower than second. Anybody who would have that record would be welcome today, right? He was the athletic director at U of I from 1901 to 1935. And he also coached the football team for 5 years while he was coaching the baseball team. And in 1907, he was also the manager of the Boston Americans. And you may know Huff Hall on the University of Illinois campus. It was named after him. And there he is with his team in 1904 on the upper left. One of his players was Carl Lundgren, shown here, who played 8 seasons for the Cubs after playing for University of Illinois, and then went on to coach Michigan baseball from 1924 to 1931, and then became the baseball coach and assistant athletic director under Huff. And probably the most famous baseball player from the University of Illinois was Lou Boudreau, who played for the Cleveland Indians from 1938 to 1952. He also played basketball, and he was disqualified because, and in light of the recent NCAA rulings on these things, it makes me kind of sad. He made an agreement with the Cleveland Indians to play with them after leaving the University of Illinois, but then they disqualified him for even making the agreement. So his senior year, he actually played professional basketball, but he did finish at the University of Illinois. He, in 1948, he was a player and also a manager. He had a .355 batting average with 18 home runs and 106 RBIs, and he won the American League MVP. Some other major league players from the U of I: Matt Hergis, who was a pitcher for the Dodgers, the Phillies, the Expos, the Blue Jays. Darren Fletcher, who played in Royal and then went on to play for the Dodgers, the Phillies, Montreal, and Toronto. And Scott Geraltz, who, this is from left to right, who was the San Francisco Giants pitcher. So, what have I missed? Well, I've probably missed Little League, and I missed American Legion baseball, and I missed the scores and scores of people who played softball. And there are just so many individuals to talk about. It's hard to cover it all. American Legion baseball was founded in 1925 as a way to occupy the time of 13 to 19-year-old boys who were getting themselves in trouble. And the Little League was founded in 1939 for kids ages 4 to 16. In 1974, they let young girls play. I'm not sure that they actually are that many girls playing still, but, and of course, there are all kinds of other leagues now, traveling leagues and so forth. But I wanted to close with this cute little picture of George Will from his later years and early years, and another quote from him, because I love it. He says, "Baseball being the difficult game it is, even the best hitters in the big leagues fail about 65% of the time. One reason for the breadth of the game's appeal is that we are all failed players. I did in Little League in Champaign, Illinois, where I was the model of mediocrity under pressure." One more thing. When we go to a ball game, whether we go to see the Danville Dans or whether we go to see the a major league team, in the seventh inning stretch, we get up and sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." And I just wanted, because I think that it, if one likes baseball, and lots of people don't, but if one does, it speaks to all of us. The song was written in 1908, and it goes, "Take me out to the ball game. I don't care if I never come back." The subject of the song was a girl, Katie Casey. And she was so addicted to baseball, she begged her boyfriend to take her out to the ball game. And she lost herself in the ball game. And I think that's why we love baseball. And in many ways, baseball created opportunities that didn't exist in the rest of life. And it's a slow measured game that you can play in hot weather. And I think that's why it persists. And what I like about it is that it has so many statistics that it requires you to remember them. And that's what makes a historian. And it also is what makes memories. And we all like to live with our memories. So I am more than happy to take any questions. Can't see anybody, but I'll be happy to talk. Pat, if you have any questions hanging out there.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much, Barb. Uh, I was gonna ask you. I think you touched on it a little bit there at the end, and then in other parts of the presentation. But what motivated you to research local baseball history? And as Barb mentioned, as I put up on the screen here, if you have a question, write it in the comments, and Barb would love to answer them, as best as we can. But yeah, Barb, what's we have this program tonight, and then at the museum we have a whole exhibit with a lot of this content on local baseball history. But what made you dive really deep into it? Of course, you have an interest and like the game yourself, but anything else that you haven't mentioned that motivated you so much to want to research local baseball history?
Well, I wouldn't say that I'm a lover of sports. I mean, and I thought about that. I thought about people who might be watching tonight and thinking, why in the heck is an old woman telling me about baseball? And baseball appeals to me for, I think, a lot of the reasons I was just talking about. Baseball, if you score a baseball game, you can reconstruct it in much the same way as you reconstruct things when you tell a story or you write a history. In fact, the historian Doris Kearns Goodwin has written a book called Better. I think it's Better Luck Next Year, or Wait Till Next Year, maybe. And it's about her learning to write history. Well, her love of the Brooklyn Dodgers, until the Brooklyn Dodgers leave Brooklyn, but also her learning to keep score, write statistics, and then reconstruct the games for her father the next day. Little realizing that there were articles in the newspaper every day about what was happening. I think that appeals to me, but I do think, it is a game that you can play in the summer months without getting too overheated, because you're not running around a whole bunch, just some, and it can be played outdoors. And I also love the fact that it's slow, that you can have a conversation while you're watching a baseball game, that you can talk about strategy and what you think might happen. And I like that too. But also, it's a hometown loyalty. If you grew up in Cincinnati, you better like the Reds. So, and I came of age right when the Big Red Machine was winning World Series and so forth. So that's part of it too.
Yeah, I was going to say too. I like the slow, measured, aspect of the game, and much like that aspect of it, and many other aspects. I like the just the relations to life in general. Like you said, you're outdoors. You can be outside and spending time with other people, and camaraderie either on camaraderie either on the teams or in the stands with the other fans, or showing your fandom with your favorite team and wearing their favorite gear. There's just a lot to like about it, for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Nancy said she attended a couple of Commodore games in the 70s at Fans Field, saw Gary Matthews hit a homer, was a Giants affiliate team then. So that's pretty cool. She saw a Commodore game.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And if you have any more questions, feel free to write those down in the comments. Would love to answer those. Barb, I had a question too from me. How did you complete your research? Where did you find your sources? Who did you talk to here in the community? Because you showed quite a few awesome resources. Whether it's photos or articles. But how'd you go about the research process? If you wouldn't mind sharing that.
No, that's fine. I spent a good bit of time in the Champaign County Historical Archives. I went to the University of Illinois Archives. I went to the McLean County Historical Museum, which also has its own archives. The McLean County Archives are there as well. And there was a fellow there who was really steeped in baseball history. He helped a lot. His name was Bill Kemp. And I talked to Jeannie Cook in Danville, who is the person who coordinates the Danville Dans team now. She has a lot of memorabilia from the early days of the Danville Dodgers. And I did talk to Lauren Tate. I talked to some people on the Buckley Dutch Masters. I actually went to a Buckley Dutch Masters game because you have to do research.
That's the best research there. That's what's happening. Yeah.
And I actually talked to a couple of people who were collectors because originally we did this exhibit in 2007, and we had some really old uniforms and old equipment and so forth to accompany the panels that are in the museum right now. But now it's just the panels. And then we actually traveled the exhibit to Decatur and Danville, which is part of the reason that I cast the net rather broader than I might have if it was just about Champaign County. I wanted to mention that there is an exhibit opening next Thursday, the 2nd of September, at the Springfield and Central Illinois African American Museum in Springfield on the Negro Leagues. And it's borrowed from Kansas City. So with a local component being put together by Catherine Harris. So I wanted to be sure that people are aware of that because I think that's going to be a great exhibit, and I'm hoping to go see it myself. But baseball brings them all out, right? I talked to the woman today who runs that museum, and she was telling me that they have a short movie that features Ernie Westfield, who played for the Birmingham Black Barons, and actually it was put together by WILL, and also talks about Bobo Smalls. I'm not sure precisely where he was from this area, though, and he played for the Indianapolis Clowns, which was another African-American baseball team, or black baseball team. I'm trying to. So anyway, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that so that people could have the opportunity to go see it.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty cool exhibit there.
Yeah.
And it's the Springfield and Central Illinois African American History Museum, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I have to check that out. That sounds pretty interesting. Maybe we can make a work field trip out of that.
There you go. Any excuse, right?
Yeah.
No, nobody should be fooled. We don't do that. We would like to do it. We always talk about it, but we never follow through.
Yeah. I'm not seeing any questions coming through, Barb, but
Okay.
if there are questions, after the fact, feel free to write those in the comment section and we can come back to them later. But thank you so much, Barb.
Yeah.
Even though we can't see you, it was a wonderful presentation. And I learned a lot. I played baseball growing up, played it in high school, played it, in the summers as well. And, has a special place in my heart. I know has a special place in yours and, folks watching out there too. There's a lot of emotion tied into the game of baseball and a lot of passion. And it's a great game. And it's great to learn about the historical aspect of it as well as the local historical aspect
Right.
here in Central Illinois. So thanks again, Barb. Thanks everybody for watching. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, I just dropped a link in the comment section. Would really love to hear from you all, get your feedback on tonight's program. So if you wouldn't mind clicking on that link and taking that short survey, it shouldn't take more than 5-ish minutes of your time. Let us know what you thought about tonight's program and what other sorts of programs you'd be interested in the Museum of the Grand Prairie or the Champaign County Forest Preserve District offering in the future. We'd love to hear from you. Any final words, Barb, before we close out tonight?
No, just thanks a lot for coming. Thanks a lot, and keep following us. We're going to have some great Lincoln lectures later in the fall, and have a lecture about the East Frisians of Illinois. You know what? Flatville, Royal, Gifford, all those places had Eastern Illinois League teams, and they're also East Frisians. So we'll have more great information to come.
Oh yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Is it the 15th annual Lincoln Lecture Series this year now?
14th.
14th. So 14th annual Lincoln Lecture Series and more rich history there in the East Frisian community of Champaign County in the northeastern section. So yeah, stay tuned. Thank you, Barb. Thanks everybody again for watching, and until next time, we'll see everybody.
Okay. Bye. Thanks.